ethics. This is going to be a fun one. So, what does it mean to live a good life?
I suppose the most fundamental distinction that we can make here is between the classical idea of a good life. People like Aristotle were talking about what is the good life, and their idea of a good life was one, a flourishing life, a meaningful life, a happy life. But happiness for Aristotle, happiness, the Greek word for happiness is eudaimonia, meaning well to one's spirit, well to one's deep speak, treating one's demons, treating one's spirits well, But it has the classical ancient idea of a good life is a meaningful life, a richer life in every way, that's developing oneself, that has relations with other people, where the modern idea of ethics is all about behaviour. What is right and wrong form of behaviour? It's like a different subject, isn't it? These are different subjects. And then I think this is reflected in the very different theories of ethics that we have. And they're very different. Some people, like Alistair MacIntyre, thinks that modern theories of ethics, since the Renaissance, are so different that you cannot really compare them. They are incommensurate. Kantian ethics, perhaps Kantian ethics is the most profound attempt to establish a systematic theory of ethics, systematic theory of behaviour, based on reason, intent, duty, and then so it has these objectives. It's asking, the question is, what is the best thing to do? That is the ethical question of Kantian ethics. But I think you can question whether this is a very good question. What is the best thing to do? It's a very...
It's very general. I can make it practical.
It's just not very general, but is it talking about the right kind of thing? Do people care? I don't care about what is the best thing to do in a ethical... It's not a question that I...
It's not an ethical question.
No, it's not.
It's not a question you will ever ask.
I think the modern questions, I think it's the wrong question for the modern person. I think the modern person is asking, how do I comport myself? How do I relate to the world? How these more general questions about the experience of one's existence in the world. And Kantian ethics seem to be tied up with doing right and wrong. Well, we've just been talking about religion, and then Kantian ethics has often been thought as a philosophicalization of religious thought. The idea of intention is very, very strong in Kantian thought. So, and then you go to other kinds of ethics, utilitarianism, very, very pragmatic. It is a pragmatic theory of ethics where right and wrong is determined by outcomes, mainly by the outcome of the happiness that we can produce for the maximum number of people. I wonder if utilitarianism can even be called a theory of ethics. As a social policy, I think it's great, to have a government or institution thinking, no government, no. to thinking about, how can we maximize the happiness for the most number of people? I mean, it's pretty good. I mean, it's almost indisputable, but as an ethical system, there's so much it can't explain. It can't explain, well, why should the individual be motivated to maximize the happiness of other people?
Mm-hmm.
Is happiness an adequate objective for people? All these are questions that utilitarianism, I think, can't properly answer. So, and then we get, again, to ethical systems like that of Aristotle. Very different, again, as we said, concerned with the flourishing of human life, rather than action. And even action is not. How do we determine right action with Aristotle? He's more concerned with dispositions, with states. That the good person has the right disposition. He's a good person, and see, Aristotle doesn't determine a lot of rules for doing the right thing. Okay, he has certain principles like the golden mean. Extremes are wrong, and he's heavily dependent upon ideas about nature and society and social conventions. Yes, but I mean, he hasn't got a set of rules, and he doesn't want a set of rules. And Aristotle's student says, well, how do we know? How do we become a good person if we haven't got these guidelines? How do we become a good person? And then Aristotle said, because he had the virtues, the virtues were set out by convention. He said, well, practice the virtues, and then you will, internalize them. You will, internalize them, and they'll become second nature. And then you will know what to do because of your dispositions. So it's very different theories, very different, accounts. I mean, I'm very skeptical about the whole ethical project, of whether we're really being misled here. And then, so, I mean, I'm rather Nietzschean in my approach to ethics. So, well, something has gone wrong here. We're asking the wrong questions. And of course, Nietzsche is talking about finding other forms of behavior, other forms of calibrating human behavior, and he's looking for a aesthetic justification, an aesthetic, not a moral justification. So you might, on an aesthetic justification, we might say, well, we don't do these things because they're in bad taste. They don't express my values rather than being right or wrong. Mm-hmm. So we still might say, well, stealing, we don't want to steal, but we don't say stealing is wrong. Stealing is, immoral. We might say, well, stealing expresses greed and a lack of sufficiency, and a lack of insight, which are aesthetic judgments more than moral judgments. So I mean, I think that's my problem with ethics, that it's going down the wrong path, I think. But I mean, because our culture is so ingrained with an ethical conception of things, it's so difficult to move away from that. And nearly everybody that I meet are determining things in a moral sense, overly so. I mean, people do something wrong and they say, well, isn't that nasty? Isn't that bad? And is it? Or are they just behaving according to their natures? And I think that this understanding, this new perception of human behaviour is something that it is coming about in human life, because whereas previously we would make moral judgments about everything. A couple of 100 years ago, people thought that mental illness was a moral failing, and people with mental illness used to be punished by having a mental illness. I mean, now we understand that it is a mental illness, and today we understand human behaviour not so much in moral terms, but we understand, well, what is the social background of this person? What is their culture? What is their psychology? What caused them to do this thing? So that's, in that sense, we're beginning to understand how a moral perspective is not adequate for understanding human behavior.
Okay, let's run with this, because this is finally we are going to warm up to a theory that just gave me the very first aha moment, which was the gradualist theory of mind. But we're not talking about just that yet. We're going to talk about gradualist perspective on moral development. So how did the moral development over, I guess, the history has changed from an individual, evolutionary and historical point of view?
Well, we can...
Might is right, yeah.
Yeah, good, yeah. So that's where I was going to go back to. I mean, we can go back and start again to get a broader perspective from the beginning. Mike is right. Behaviour, we determine right and wrong in terms of behaviour and rules. Then, intention in the Christian view, we have a much more subjective view, and where compassion and so forth comes into play. And then in the more modern view, we're starting to think, well, are people to blame at all? They're just products of the environment, and perhaps we need to lock them up so they don't hurt other people, rather than to punish them. I mean, still in Singapore, there's still a very punitive conception of ethics and law. People here. There was somebody who was found guilty of murdering his child in Singapore, and he was sentenced to 20 years in prison plus 20 lashes of the whip. And I thought, but what? Once you put somebody in prison for 20 years, why do you have to whip them? It just seems barbaric. It seems that something has gone wrong here. That there's a morality that is telling you, well, that the punishment is needed, and we're locking them up just not to keep them away from other people in a pragmatic way, but we're locking them up in order to punish them. And this is indicated by, well, we not only lock them up, but we whip them as well.
So I guess the argument would be is that if there would not be the punishment part of it, then people would be more freely doing the things.
Yeah. So that's one argument that one have to. I mean, does punishment really prevent people from doing things? Yeah, so that's, yeah, you could argue both sides of the argument. But I mean, I think the idea of caning or whipping people, if you kill somebody, I don't think you're thinking about these things. I mean, you may be thinking about the court, but I mean, I don't think you're thinking about, oh, I'm not going to kill this person because I'm going to be whipped. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem to be a very good deterrent.
Well, and eventually you will have to integrate them back to society. So the more post-traumatic stress they get, the worse they're gonna get when they come out.
But yeah, I mean, this is the practical aspect. But I mean, we're talking about the expression of an ethical perspective. Mm-hmm. How society, how law, how people are understanding people, understanding them in a moralistic way, that they should be thinking about it in a psychological or social sense, or even And if you want to say something is I mean you can condemn, you can say things are right and wrong in psychological terms as well as aesthetic. I mean, Nietzsche never fully developed his aesthetic account of human behaviour. He's trying to work it out, and I think we're still trying to work it out. Let me guess, because we need ways of saying this is right and wrong, but we don't. In every field of endeavour, if you're playing chess, you say, well, this is a good move, this is a bad. But it needn't be a moral move. And in human behaviour, I mean, a lot of things that happen, they needn't be moral. How much is moral and how much is not.
Yeah.
And there's a place here for a aesthetic judgment.
Okay, well, let's go through what mankind was able to come up with in terms of ethical theories, one by one, starting with religious ethics. Just a quick summary of it.
Classically, it's called divine command theory. Divine command theory. The idea that, God determines what's right and wrong. Mm-hmm. And then you follow the rules that God has laid out.
Okay.
But I mean, as we've indicated, it's a much more subtle process. There's a process of development now.
And there are many religions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically what we were talking about so far. So, but then, instead of God telling us what to do, now you have to choose it for yourself. The categorical imperative, Kant telling us what to do. So, what's the categorical imperative?
The categorical, imperative is a complex of different parts. It's just not one rule.
Okay. So, okay. Tell me, what am I saying then?
The categorical imperative, what it means is that you must behave in a certain way.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, can I do this section or not? It's a test now.
I mean, we can contrast it to a hypothetical imperative. A hypothetical imperative is saying, if you want this to happen, if you don't want this to harm this person, you must treat him in this way. But the categorical imperative, you say, you must do this. There is no if about it. It's just a necessity that you must do it. Now, what is the basis of the necessity in Kant's view? Well, the basis of it is reason, because he's trying to find some stricture that is binding on people, but it can't be external to the person. Because interestingly, Kant was a believer. He was a Christian. But he said you can't construct an ethics on religion because you can't be simply commanded to act in a certain way. It's because God says, you do this. And a thinking person says, why? Why should I do what God tells me? I just go and do what I want. So we want some stricture that is compels, that is binding upon the individual, that is internal to the individual, not from the outside. Quite brilliantly, Kant used reason, which is internal to the individual. It's a faculty that the people have, and so if they're using their own faculties, they can, within themselves, construct rules that are binding on themselves. Now, I don't think it works because reason is internal to the individual, but it's not internal to the value system which motivates people to act in a moral way. For Humean reasons, we were previously talking about Hume's principle that a prescriptive moral ought cannot be derived from a fact or morals from reason. So for that kind of reason, you cannot, in this view, employ reason to construct a principle that's binding, because it will always be a hypothetical imperative. It will always be, if you want to do this, then you must do that. With reason, you say, if you blow up this building, then everybody will die. But, in order not to want to blow up this building, you wouldn't want everybody to die. So you have to have that moral premise in there to make any process of moral reasoning work. And that's what Kant wasn't really able to provide.
Let me ask a question then, because I don't know, maybe I don't know why, but I thought the categorical imperative is a very simple thing. It's a simple thing in a sense that everyone should be able to apply it, ideally, which is that you ask the question, if everyone would do this action, then how would the world look like? And if the world would look not in a way that you would like, then you don't do that action.
No.
So what's this then?
This is a pragmatic justification of Kant's categorical imperative, that he sometimes uses himself, so he contradicts himself, because he's arguing that one must not employ such pragmatic means to determine what's right and wrong. He wants to find a purely internal and rational way. But for Kant, intention, so with his precept of choice, intention is terribly important. The goodwill is very important. So and it must not be adulterated by any ulterior motive. Like, for example, if I said, okay, I want to come round to help you to paint your house, Kant would say, well, why do you want to come and help you to paint your house? And if I said, well, I want to learn about painting a house, that would be a ulterior motive. And Kant would say, but it's not a moral action. if you, it would be a moral action if you wanted to help, if you wanted to paint his house purely because you wanted to help him to paint his house.
So it's like what I'm doing here is not a moral action because I'm not purely want to help
Yes.
you, although there is that thing
Yes.
as well, but
Yes.
I also want to learn.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It is, but this is a failure. I mean, of the Kantian
the
system
Kantian
because
system,
it's a failure
right.
because it doesn't take into aspects of humanity that Aristotle would take into account. I mean, if you went to somebody visit them in hospital, and your friend that you're visiting said, "Oh, why did you come?" Because we're talking about duty now. Your friend said, "But why did you come to visit me in the hospital?" And you say, "Oh, I did it out of duty." Well, your friend would be very sad because your friend would want you to come and visit him because he's your friend, because out of fellowship, out of love, out of affection, not out of duty. If you do things out of duty, as Kant thought, which was a high moral ideal, that's not adequate for visiting your friend. So these principles, because they're so rational, they fail.
I see. So that's why when we went to visit our grandmas and we had like half an hour every grandma, then they didn't really like that concept that we were like rushing and giving the time, even though because that sounds like I was doing it with duty.
But of course, in society, we understand a lot of things the duty.
Okay.
So yes, we're talking about. So what are we talking about? We're talking about different theories of ethics.
Utility.
The Kantian theory.
It's more.
And of course, the problem is that you can go through all these theories, and there's grievous failures with them, all of them. So what do we do? Personally, I mean, I would like to propose a value theory of ethics. Okay, but I mean, I propose it as an interim measure for people who want a theory of ethics. Now, I don't think that theories of ethics are very good. I think we should go beyond theories of ethics. But if we're bogged down with theories of ethics, like if you're talking to a person about God and they believe in God, you can say, you can talk to the person about God. You say, well, if I believed in God, God would have to be like this, but you still don't believe in God, but you're talking to the person about God. You might say, well, if I believed in God, my God wouldn't be a vengeful God. My God would be a compassionate God. So you can still talk about these things even if you don't believe in them. And in the same kind of way, I would like to present a value theory of ethics. I don't believe in ethics, but I think if you want a theory of ethics, I think a value theory of ethics is better than these other ones.
We're getting there. But let's go to another one. Utilitarianism. It's John Stuart Mill, Bentham, Jeremy Bentham,
Bentham, yes,
who designed the panopticon. Hugely relevant for my field of mass surveillance thinking. Anyhow, utilitarianism. You want to maximize the happiness of the greatest number of people, so your actions should align with that.
Yeah, so right and wrong is determined by how you maximize the greatest happiness by the greatest number of people.
It's pretty simple.
Yeah, very simple. Yeah, I mean, that's the huge attraction. It's very simple and practical. But
So what are the problems?
I mean, how do you do that? I mean, in practical terms, how do you maximize the greatest happiness for the greater number of people? I mean, what does make people happy? How do you quantify it?
And why happy?
And economists tell us that there are unintended consequences that we don't know about. So all these are huge practical problems for a theory that's supposed to be very practical. So on its own grounds, it's a bit shaky.
And your mother equal to the person living in the other end of the world. It's a problem of distancing. I think that's limited.
Moral distancing. I think that's more of a problem. You could use it against utilitarianism, but I mean, I think it's more a problem for Kant, who's got an absolutist conception of moral values. But I mean, for me, the bigger problems of utilitarianism, it just doesn't account for what a human being is. I mean, what does a human being aspire to? Is he just aspiring to happiness? I think people. I mean, even if they do aspire to happiness, it's not adequate as a theory of ethics, because there's so much more that people aspire to. I mean, we're trying to explain human behaviour. What about meaning and purpose and joy and value? It doesn't account for these things. So also, it doesn't explain why. I mean, it's a theory. It doesn't explain why the individual ought to behave in such a way to maximize the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. I mean, why should the individual do that? I mean, it's against their interest.
So there are many consequentialist ethics here. And you think none of them addresses all these problems satisfactorily, just like in the many logics, or you think like at least there are utilitarianism forms?
Then you have different aspects of utilitarianism, like rule utilitarianism and act utilitarianism, and a whole load of different other ethical theories. I mean, even existentialism, it has a kind of a ethical theory, although there's lots of theories.
Ethical egoism. So it is also a simple thing. You do what egoism, simple thing. You do what's in your best interest, but you seem to have saved egoism in a way that we can go back to the Kantian logic, Kantianism, that you might consider, you should consider people as ends, not only merely as means, and then analyze it a bit from value point of view, and I'm going to tell you what my understanding is. How did you save egoism? And then you tell me how I'm wrong. So my understanding is that if you do what's in your best interest, and you do realize the value, the intrinsic value of other people, and that other people are also assigning value to you, therefore somehow the value is reflecting back to you, the value of other people is reflecting back to you, therefore your best interest is to consider other people much more valuable than how a narrow-minded egoism would. Am I even close?
Yes, because I mean, this is an argument against egoism, because egoism, of people like Max Stirner and Ayn Rand, I think they've got a limited conception of their own self-interest. When you are living in the world, when you're moving in the world, there are not only, there are objects in the world that you have to appreciate, and these objects have meaning for you, but some of these objects are people, and these people have greater meaning than the physical objects. In all kinds of ways, in how you've expressed it. A number of people make up society, and society has a tremendous power to influence us, determine how we think, how we feel, what we should do. So to ignore that is not in our best interest. For me, I have to start, if you want me to give a proper critique of egoism, I have to start with the idea of my conception of a human being as somebody who's pursuing value, looking for value, seeking out the value, and looking into the world and say, well, how can I maintain my value? How can I enhance my value? Which at first view looks very egoistical, because you're thinking about yourself. But how does my relation with other people affect my value? How can I value myself if I disvalue other people? So one's own self-value is, I think, intimately related with how one values other people. And if one disvalues other people, what does that say about your perception of the world? It means that this part of the world doesn't affect me. Yeah, so I think that when one looks at the world, one is looking at the world, one is finding value, looking for value. I think that one cannot ignore the fact of other valuable creatures in the world.
Two situations when I noticed something here. One is there are special kinds of computer games. Those are actually books, but disguised as computer games, which is that your character is going on the map, but you always have basically the entire game is reading conversations, choosing options, and reading, and sometimes choosing, maybe go here and go there. And when you go to a new room, a new map, a new territory, then what I've been doing, by the way, Planescape Torment, everyone should play it, best game ever. Anyway, what I noticed is that what I've been doing is that I go through all the objects, and when I checked out all the objects, that's when I go to the people. But then I was like, now people are the special objects here. Maybe I should start with the people. So I started with the people and not with the objects. And that made things more fluent. And it turns out probably the developers wanted you to start with the people, not the objects. Who knew? So this was an interesting realization here. But another one is much more real life kind of realization is when you go into an elevator and there is another person, or when you get into a taxi and there is the taxi driver. I am very used to being in my own thoughts, right? Like I get into a taxi and I am working right now. I am thinking of what to do, how to not waste my time. What's the most important thing I can do right now? But maybe I should strike up a conversation with this taxi driver or with the person in the elevator with me. I don't know, because there are these special kinds of objects called people, and they are much more relevant than other things. Those are happening next to me or maybe sometimes even inside me. So, and when I started to have strike up conversations with these random people. I end up in the same room. After every single thing, I just started to feel better about myself, which is strange. Just by this. It's also high maintenance.
I mean, what I'm trying to find really, I mean, of course, I think other people are special for different kinds of reasons. And I think because we are evolved creatures, our minds, our brains are structured in a particular kind of way. They're structured in a particular way to function, to work, to get things done. And I don't doubt that, but recognizing other people is a crucially important aspect of getting things done. I mean, there's one theory that Neanderthals lived in small family groups, whereas human beings lived in tribal groups. Mm. So the social relations of human beings were much better than Neanderthals. And because they were better, I mean, if one person in the group of a tribe learned something, it's the whole tribe that knows that skill. Or a family group, one person knows it, and perhaps one or two people will know it. And again, I mean, larger social groups which interact with each other. I mean, you have a chance for a specialization. One person makes clothes, another person makes tools, perhaps. Whereas in a family group, everybody makes everything, and perhaps don't do it so well. So I mean, I think there are very genetically ingrained reasons why humans or Neanderthals recognize other people. But to me, that doesn't answer the question. I mean, by living out those genetic inclinations, I think, we're going to feel better about it, I think. I mean, if we're contradicting our inclinations, I think we're going to feel bad. Mm-hmm. That's just my thinking, But that's not my question, because I think, like Kant, I want to find something that is more definitive. Psychology and genetics and social structures, for me, are not enough to determine why I should behave in a certain way towards people. I need a more definitive reason. It's like Einstein said, I don't believe that God plays dice with the universe, but I don't believe that that morals is simply a product of genetics or society. If it was, then we can have another society in which good becomes evil and evil becomes good. There's a sociologist, I forget his name. He writes about a group of people, a tribe. He calls them the mountain people. For some perverse reason, the conventions of the mountain people had become upset, and instead of treating other people well, they thought it was fun to treat other people badly, and the whole society, because of that, was in decline. If you have processes in which treat people or conventions in which people are treated badly, the society will decline. If you have structures, genetic and social, in which people are treated well, then society will develop. People will get on. But so you can explain ethical behaviour, I think, very nicely in in sociological and genetic ways. But I mean, but that's not enough. I want to find some way that is. I can't appeal to logic and reason as Kant does. I need. I don't want to use the word absolute, but I need certain structures that substantiate the behaviour, and for me, those certain structures come from consciousness. Like, I think that there are features, there are structures of consciousness that are very basically, I mean, we've already mentioned one, that is contrast. In order to perceive the world, you need a contrast between a black spot and a white background. If you don't have that contrast, you can't perceive it. So that is, I think, a substantive structure of consciousness that cannot be avoided. So that is the kind of principle that I'm looking for to determine the behaviour between people, rather than just a sociological or genetic one.
All right. Well, let's move on to our last ethics. That's still not yours, which was Aristotle's virtue theory of ethics. So this is a different kind of beast, because it doesn't seem to tell you doesn't seem to give you a clear instruction of what to do, but more like you should act according to your values, but there are no clear rules like utilitarianism or Kantianism does. So tell me about Aristotelian ethics. What is virtue? What is vice? And then why do you like this approach a bit more than utilitarianism or Kantianism?
Yeah, I mean, because it is it's so versatile for a start. In the virtue theory view of good or virtue, I mean, okay, there are virtues like magnanimity and courage, and these are just expressions of a disposition that the virtuous person has. As the example previously, I mean, it was so. How does the virtuous person know what to do? Well, he's a virtuous person. He just makes a judgment, and because he's a virtuous person, he knows what to do. Well, this is,
he's in the flow.
It's both. It reveals the versatility of virtue theory's system, but it also reveals a weakness. There's no real explanation of that judgment. Why should he do the things that he's doing? I mean,
it frees up so much mind space that you just feel like this is the right thing to do, rather than having to reason and think about.
But it's not an adequate theory of motivation. It's not, and it's not an adequate theory of ethics, because it's so pointing to something. You say, well, you need good judgment, but what is that good judgment? I mean, and how do we establish it? So, I mean, some theorists have said, well, Aristotle's theory of behaviour and action is not codifiable. There's no way that you can systemize it. Okay, so but at least we want to try to explain it in some way, find some way apart from just learning the behaviour by watching other people or acting out the behaviours, so you'll internalize them. I mean, and that's the virtue theory. I mean, there's more to it than that. I mean, as we said, there are set virtues. In my view, I replace the virtues with values, because I mean the virtues are the virtues are value states anyway.
Mhm.
So it's very natural to go from virtues to values. And then we talked about, but what is the disposition? So in virtue theory, we're talking about the disposition. So in value theory, the disposition is you're valuing yourself. Your value, you have self-esteem, self-value, and then you want to find ways of enhancing that value, of maintaining that value. So you're looking out on the world and say, well, how do I enhance my value? Do I enhance my value by hurting this person? Well, maybe if you're a psychopath, but then if you're a psychopath, you have to think, well, I'm a psychopath. Does that enhance my value by being a psychopath?
So,
And why do I want to hurt this person? Is it a weakness? Is it psychological weakness? So I don't want to be a psychologically weak person, because that's a disvalue. I want to value myself.
Okay.
So I don't want to hurt people. Quite the reverse. I want to help people, and then by helping people, I will enhance my value. So in the same way as Aristotelian ethics, I hope to have no set rules about what one should do in every circumstance, because this is a criticism also of Kantian thought and systems of that kind. They're trying to construct a system in which, in theory, you can know about what to do in every circumstance. There are some set of rules that you can work out, which is, I think, impractical, inconceivable. I think the system has to be. I mean, it's much more realistic. It's much more, realistic to me to think, we want to find a system in which there's an infinite number of occasions, of circumstances, of events, of choices that we can make in the world. So we cannot construct a system that will be able to contend with an infinite number of circumstances. So we have to have some principle, some way that will be able to cope with whatever comes around. Virtue theory is one way, but you can't explain it. So I replace the virtue theory with value theory.
So the value theory, let me see if I understand this correctly. The value theory ethics is that you're an agent in this arena, and what your final value is to enhance your own value, and a special way of enhancing your value of how you're dealing with other people, and you are better to help them rather than hurt them, because one is enhancing your value more than hurting them, which is making it your value.
And what I'd like to say is, I think whether you decide that you're helping them or hurting them is a contingent judgment. It depends upon your knowledge. It depends upon how you understand the world. It depends upon how you understand them, other people.
You can hurt them, and by that you're helping them sometimes, like with your child, right? You want your child to sometimes get hurt because you want your child to be ready for whatever comes.
Yeah, so these are part of the complex circumstances that you have to make judgments about. But also, I mean, it's not only the circumstances, but it's people. People are not all the same. I mean, and what about children? What about a moral theory for children? I mean, you have to account for how much children don't know and what kind of judgments they're going to make. Or you have to, one of the problems of ethics is you have to account for mistakes, error. We do things that are wrong. How do you account for that? Because these errors are part of our judgments, are part of what we don't know. So the right or wrongness, I think, of the system is about your value, your self-value, and wanting to express that value in a Kantian kind of way, because in a Kantian kind of way, because that is the kind of principle that is established on the basis of the nature of a consciousness. We're looking for a substantive foundation for such a principle. So that's another problem on value theory. It's all very nice to say you act in a certain way to enhance your value, but what is this? Why should you? Why should you enhance your value? Like going back to an earlier question, why are we pursuing value rather than happiness? So it only value theory, ethics only works if we can in some way justify the pursuit of value. If we can't justify the pursuit of value in some way, then we cannot, we cannot use it as a general foundation for behavior.
We've done that already, but we're still doing that. Look, regarding the methodology here, there is also something that is in some sense very liberating, which is the present moment justification. So I prided myself for a long time, maybe I still do, that my work is to be 3 years into the future and think about what will happen in the future 3 years from now, because no one else is doing that in our company, because if they would do that, they would not be able to make changes. But I am in that position to think about the future. So I've been living in the future, and I really forget about the present very often. So sometimes I have to just take a step back. I'm here. This is my situation. I'm not actually living in the future. This is the present. We are here talking, and now I have to focus on this situation and not what I will do later on. So anyway, what is present moment justification?
We can only have experiences in the future. In the present. Experiences in the future or experience in the past are not experiences. They are concepts or ideas about the experience. So the reality of that experience is different in the present to the past or the future. If it's something in the future, we are objectifying it. But that's a mistake, because if we say, well, look, you can have an idea of something in the future, right, and I will pursue that idea. But then to project oneself into the future and try to live in that future is to do something that cannot be done. It's a perversion of feeling and value. It's like the objectification of values. Values are subjective. Values are choices, and we have a choice. If we say we don't have a choice, we are objectifying that idea, and instead of allowing it to be a subjective choice. And I think in the same way, if we think of these feelings or values as in the past or in the present, I think we're trying to think of them as objects in the past or the present, and not as, because they can't be experiences in the past or the present. They can only be experiences in the present.
we'll probably get into these things when we get to the mind.
Some philosophers think that the past and the present and the future have an equal status. But I don't think that they do have an equal status. That the present has a status that the past and the present do not have. And they are not equal things that can be equated in the same way. For example, if I were to say, would you want to have a period of pain followed by a period of pleasure, or a period of pleasure followed by a period of pain? I think you would say, let's have the pain first. Because if you had the pleasure first, you couldn't enjoy it, because you'd always be thinking about the pain that is coming in the future. So I don't think that the past, present, and future do not have an equal status in my view.
And
I think they're different. And it's a very rationalist view to think, that they all do have the same status. Oh well, if we're going to be in pain, what's the difference if you have the pain in the future? But it is quite different.
And how does this tie back to the ethics?
Both Nietzsche and Sartre said, I don't know what I'm going to say after this, but both Nietzsche and Sartre said, we cannot find justification for ourselves either in the past or in the future. We have to find a justification for ourselves in the present. So what is the thinking behind that? Is that, we're thinking, I did a good act in the past, therefore it's okay in the present. So that can justify me in the present. I think that if we're finding meaning in the present, I think you can only find meaning in the present. I think if you're thinking, I hope that I'm going to find meaning in the future, I think it's just a hope you're going to find meaning in the future. It's not meaning. It's just the idea that you're going to find meaning in the future. So in that sense, meaning can only be experienced in the present. It can't be if you've got an idea of it in the future, it is only an idea. We can talk about values in a similar kind of way, that the values only exist in the present. If you have values, you can't have values in the future. You can say, I think that perhaps it might be a nice idea to have that value in the future. Yeah, but it's not a value in the future. The status of it is an idea. It's a cognitive event. It's not a value event.
All right. Let's the last question about the value theory of ethics is what do we do with value? Are we maximizing it, or are we trying to achieve a sufficient amount of it? So,
the thing is, surely the notion of a maximization of value in the same way as a maximization of happiness is a mistake. And value is not only a quantity, it's also a quality. So I think that the quality of the value is crucially important. So if you're an egoist, you may be maximizing your value in one way, but the quality of that value, I think, is mistaken. It's not as good as a more refined kind of value. Yeah, somebody asked me, at the meetup group, he said, well, what about people who die for the sake of other people? Isn't that, destroying themselves? So how can they be valuing themselves? Well, I mean, I think the quality of their value is such in the moment. I mean, this is another good expression of time, that they're justifying themselves in the present. That justification of themselves in the present, enables them to confront the loss of the future in their death. I mean, in them dying for the sake of somebody else, it's not a maximization of their value, but it's a enhancement of the quality of their value, and that quality of value is what's important. It's not the maximization of value in time or in feeling, or self-aggrandizement.
So you see, I do have a similar experience. I've been working on some cryptographic papers, and the first version. Okay, so it's about privacy, anonymity, fungibility of money, and the first version, I think I did it in 2017. What I've been going for is maximizing this privacy of the individuals. But the next version was there was a realization that, well, people don't want maximum privacy. They want enough privacy. Right? Like it doesn't matter if their anonymity set is 1 million or 1,000. 1,000 is basically equals 1 million. It's like we're talking about in infinities here. It's like 1,000 times infinity is still infinity. So that was an interesting realization that maximization is not really what you're trying to achieve, but you want to provide a minimum but stable level of privacy. So that's on the topic of sufficiency and enoughness.
Yeah, and we made a similar point about choice previously. You don't want the maximization of choice. You want enough. You want enough choice.
Good. Okay, I will think about that. That's interesting. Okay, so that also means you might not want the maximization of freedom. Okay, never mind. So let's wrap this topic up with the final question, what you were waiting for all along and trying to get into all along, which is the failure of ethics. Skepticism about ethics. Why do you believe ethics is failing, and why? Yeah, many people believe ethics is failing us. There seems to be something's missing here from thinking of the world in ethical ways.
Well, I mean, one could say very simply that behavior, which is what ethics is all about, isn't adequate to express what a human being needs to do, and neither is intention. I mean, yeah, of course, but behavior. And then you say, well, is intention enough? Is goodwill enough? I don't think so. I don't think that these are the fundamental aspects of ethics. And if the fundamental aspects of ethics aren't adequate to human aspiration, then they're not adequate.
The scope of ethics is infinite, yet the goals of it is very constrained.
The goals are very constrained, and what is happening, what he's trying to do. And I think, one way to look at it is we've talked about the development of ethics. Okay, we've talked about the development. Yeah, but what comes after? what we can see where we are now. So, so you get it. Well, but there's a development. There's no reason to think that we're at the end of the development. Something is coming after. So we got to think about what's got to come after our conception of ethics at the moment. And, these ideas about good intentions, goodwill, behavior, are simply not adequate.
Yes.
So what, so something else is needed.
Well,
and
we need value.
Yeah. So this is my answer. Yeah. So, but then, we need a much more detailed, a conception of value and the things that make the quality of value, like, the certain things that perhaps will create.
That will be the job of analytic philosophy, to create the detailed conception of value.
But I think there are certain a coherence of value and regarding absence as an important aspect of value, being able to incorporate absence into value.
Okay, we are going to go off the rails here.
Yeah. Okay. So
the last time, absence of value, but we also talked about negative value. So you, okay. So is there something common here, like negative value with the devil and Luther, right? So value can be negative, but it can be absent. That these are different concepts.
Yes, the negative value. Absent. I think the absences are an important. I mean, it's a very interesting idea. The absence of something, and sometimes the absence of certain values are better than their presence. If you make a moralistic judgment, it's better not to make it. It's a contradiction, but I'm thinking, perhaps the presence of an absence. How can you have the presence of an absence? The presence of an absence may be inducive to value. I mean, and the biggest presence of an absence that we can have is death, an impending death. So, I mean, the presence of an absence, perhaps the conception of the absence of a future may be conducive to producing a quality of value. I mean, that's the kind of thing these are the kind of criteria that I'm trying to work out, so I'm trying to think about, having criticized the idea of a maximization of value, now we want to, a quantification of value. We want to work out how can we understand the quality of value.
Right. Well, we want to create a calculus of value.
Yeah. Perhaps.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.